The white two-story house standing in the suburban residential area of Houston and Texas was a precious home filled with nearly 40 years of memories for Margaret Anderson. Since her husband Robert suddenly passed away from a heart attack 5 years ago, she had been maintaining this house all by herself. While drinking her morning coffee, Margaret gazed out at the backyard. The roses that Robert had planted while he was alive were blooming beautifully again this year. Thanks to her pension and her husband's inheritance, she had no financial worries. In fact, she was living more comfortably than when she had worked as a librarian. Her health was excellent too. She never missed her yoga classes 3 times a week and her daily walks. She maintained good relationships with her neighbors, and despite living alone, she rarely felt lonely. What made her happiest above all was the presence of her 3 children and their families. Jennifer was a skilled real estate agent who had achieved success in her career while raising 2 daughters. Michael worked as a hospital administrator, building a peaceful home with his wife and son. And Lisa was a stay-at-home mom, lovingly raising her 5-year-old son Tommy. Each of her children had married and become independent, and someone always visited on weekends. The days when her grandson Tommy came to visit were especially the greatest joy for Margaret. The storytelling skills she had cultivated over many years at the library created magical moments for Tommy. Watching Tommy's eyes light up when she read dinosaur books, or seeing him become completely absorbed in adventure novels, filled Margaret's heart with happiness. "Grandma, what story are we reading today?" Tommy would ask in his usual voice full of anticipation. Margaret would smile and take a new book from the shelf, sitting next to Tommy. These moments were the most precious time in her life. Last Sunday, when Lisa visited with Tommy, Margaret noticed that her daughter seemed a bit tired. When Lisa confided, "Mom, I haven't been sleeping well lately," Margaret became concerned. When she suggested, "I'll help watch Tommy more often, so please rest sometimes," Lisa's face showed gratitude. Margaret took pride in her health and independent lifestyle. She handled all the cooking, cleaning, and gardening herself. She regularly had lunch with neighborhood friends and participated in a book club. Drawing on her library experience, she continued volunteering to read stories to local children. In the evenings, Margaret had a habit of talking to Robert's photograph about the day's events. "Tommy came to visit again today. If you were still alive, you would probably have had him on your lap telling him baseball stories." Robert in the photograph seemed to be looking at Margaret with his gentle smile. All her children had married and built happy families, and her grandchildren were growing up healthy. Margaret fully understood that she was living a blessed life. Every night before bed, Margaret prayed for her family's happiness. She wished for her children to stay healthy, for her grandchildren to grow up happily, and for everyone to continue treasuring each other. And she would fall asleep looking forward to someone visiting again tomorrow. This was Margaret Anderson's peaceful and happy daily life. With the arrival of spring, Margaret began to notice subtle changes in her children's behavior. Jennifer, who usually visited about once a month, had been showing up twice a week for the past 2 months. At first, Margaret thought it was due to work schedules, but her daughter's topics of conversation were always the same. "Managing this big house all by yourself must be difficult, don't you think?" Jennifer would say with a worried expression, looking around the living room. "Cleaning and yard work can't be as easy as they were when you were younger." Margaret smiled wryly. "I'm still quite energetic. I go to yoga classes and enjoy gardening. Don't worry about me." "But what if something happens?" Jennifer continued. "When you're alone, no one might notice if something goes wrong. The neighbors are probably busy too." Similar conversations began happening with Michael as well. Her son, who worked as a hospital administrator, voiced more specific concerns. "Have you had any memory problems lately? Are you managing your medications properly?" "I'm happy that my son is concerned about me, but I haven't gone senile yet," Margaret replied with a laugh. As for medications, I only take blood pressure medicine, and I take it properly every day, so there's no problem. Yes, of course, but just to be safe, Michael smiled gently. It might be better if we checked on you regularly. It would give us peace of mind too. Lisa also began visiting more frequently than before. The frequency of her visits with Tommy increased, and Margaret was genuinely delighted to have more time with her grandson. Tommy says he wants to see Grandma more, Lisa explained. He must be telling his friends at school about his grandma. Tommy had indeed become more affectionate than before. The time he spent sitting on Margaret's lap having books read to him grew longer as he said, "Grandma, I want to stay with you forever." Sometimes he would say, "Mom's busy, so I want to sleep over at Grandma's house." Margaret interpreted her children's changes positively. "Everyone's become so sweet," she told her neighbor friend Mary. "When they were young, they were too busy to visit home much, but maybe they're worried about me now that I've turned 60. "That's wonderful," Mary smiled. "Your family bonds are deepening. It's probably rare these days for a grandchild to be so attached to their grandmother." Her children's attentiveness increased day by day. Jennifer brought brochures for housekeeping services, suggesting, "This would make house cleaning easier and reduce your burden, Mom." Michael introduced a nurse who worked at a nearby hospital, saying, "If you have regular health checkups, we'll feel more at ease." Lisa began worrying about cooking. "Are you eating properly? When you're alone, don't you get lazy and just eat simple things?" She checked the refrigerator and said, "There's a meal delivery service that focuses on nutritional balance. Would you like to try it?" Margaret listened politely to her children's suggestions, but inwardly she felt a bit puzzled. She was still quite capable of living independently, why were they so worried about her? However, she understood it as an expression of family love and made sure not to forget her gratitude. In May, the children began talking about Margaret's birthday. "Let's celebrate in a big way this year," Jennifer suggested. "I'd like to invite all the relatives and throw a wonderful party." "You don't need to make such a big fuss," Margaret replied hesitantly. "It would be enough to spend time quietly with you all, as usual." Michael agreed. "We want everyone to know what a precious person you are to us." "I agree too," Lisa clapped her hands happily. "Tommy will be delighted. He's been wanting to do something special for Grandma." Persuaded by her children's enthusiasm, Margaret agreed to accept a big birthday party. "Well, I'll leave it to you then. But you don't need anything too expensive." "Don't worry," Jennifer smiled reassuringly. "We'll make it a lovely party, so just look forward to the day, Mom." As party preparations began in earnest, the children started visiting the family home even more frequently. They showed up for various reasons like venue inspection, menu consultation, and invitation confirmation. Margaret was deeply moved seeing her children working so hard for her sake. "To be loved this much, I'm truly a fortunate person," Margaret murmured to herself. She spoke to her husband Robert's photograph. "If you were alive, you would surely have been moved by our children's kindness. They've all grown up wonderfully, and now they're taking such good care of me." With 1 month remaining until her birthday, Margaret was living happy days surrounded by her family's love. On June 15th, Margaret's birthday, the children were busy with preparations from early morning. Jennifer was meeting with caterers from dawn, Michael was rearranging the living room furniture that would serve as the venue, and Lisa was skillfully arranging the large quantity of flowers delivered from the florist, decorating the entire house beautifully. "Mom, don't do anything today," Jennifer said with a smile. "We'll take care of everything, so just take your time getting ready." Margaret spent time carefully preparing in her bedroom, grateful for her children's thoughtfulness. She applied light makeup in front of the mirror and put on the pearl necklace that her husband had given her while he was alive. "Today is a special day," she smiled at herself in the mirror. Around 3 p.m., relatives began arriving one after another. including Margaret's sisters, cousins, and even her children's family friends. More than 40 people gathered. Margaret felt genuine joy at reuniting with relatives she hadn't seen in a long time. "Margaret, you really look so well," her cousin Dorothy said, holding her hand. "Thank you, Dorothy. I'm so happy that everyone came," Margaret replied with tears in her eyes. The living room was filled with luxurious food. Roast beef, grilled salmon, Caesar salad, homemade pancakes, colorful vegetable dishes, and in the center, a 3-tiered birthday cake. Everything was restaurant-quality food, and Margaret was surprised that her children had spent so much on this. "Everyone, let's toast to Mom," Jennifer raised her champagne glass high. "To our precious mother, Margaret Anderson, on her birthday." Applause and cheers filled the air, and Margaret felt her chest warm with emotion. After that, the children took turns giving speeches. "Mom has been the best mother to us," Jennifer said with tears in her eyes. "She always supported us and showered us with love no matter what. Please stay healthy and happy for a long time to come." Michael spoke from his perspective as a healthcare professional. "Mom is our pride. But now it's our turn to repay you. We'll take good care of you, Mom." Lisa spoke with deep emotion. "Mom, to Tommy, you're the world's best grandmother. To us too, you're the center of our family. Please stay healthy forever." As the meal began, conversation flowed and laughter never ceased. Margaret felt the warmth of a large family for the first time in a long while and truly felt happiness from the bottom of her heart. The relatives praised her health, saying things like, "You still look so young," and "Please live a long life." As the meal was nearing its end, while Margaret was eating dessert cake, Tommy approached her chair. Her 5-year-old grandson, who usually had a friendly smile, looked somehow worried today. "Grandma," Tommy called out in a small voice. The adults around them were chatting happily, and no one was paying attention to Tommy's actions. "What is it, Tommy?" Margaret smiled as she looked down at her grandson. Tommy checked left and right, then brought his face close to Margaret's ear. In a small, trembling voice, he whispered, "Grandma, you need to leave this place right now." Margaret's eyes widened in surprise. "What? Why? What do you mean?" Tears welled up in Tommy's eyes. He answered, desperately keeping his voice down, "Because the real purpose of this party is." Just then, Lisa noticed from across the table. "Tommy, what are you talking to Grandma about?" Tommy looked at his mother and hesitated for a moment. But as if summoning courage, he continued, "To put Grandma in a facility." Margaret gasped. The sound of surrounding chatter suddenly became distant, and her heart began beating violently. "Tommy, is that really true?" "Yes," Tommy nodded while crying. "Yesterday, Mom and Aunt Jennifer and Uncle Michael were talking. They're going to lie and say Grandma has dementia and put her in a facility." Margaret's hands began to shake. "Lie about dementia?" Mom and the others were saying, "Grandma is sick, so she can't live alone anymore." "But I know Grandma isn't sick. You always read books to me, you're good at cooking, and there's nothing wrong with you at all." Lisa hurriedly stood up and rushed around the table to Tommy. "Tommy, what are you saying? That's not true." But Tommy moved away from his mother and stood by Margaret's side. "Mom, you're lying. I heard everything. You said, let's sell Grandma's house and split the money, didn't you?" The adults around them gradually stopped talking and began to notice this unusual situation. Jennifer and Michael also looked over with panicked expressions. "Tommy, that's a misunderstanding," Lisa tried to take her son's hand. "It was grown-up talk that children can't understand." Margaret stood up. Her legs were shaking, but she desperately tried to stay calm. "Everyone, I'm sorry. I seem to be feeling a bit unwell. Mom, are you okay?" Jennifer approached with concern. Yes, I'm fine. But I'd like to rest a little, Margaret forced a smile. Thank you for the wonderful party. I'm grateful to everyone. The relatives looked at Margaret with concern, but they spoke kindly, saying things like, you must be tired, and, don't push yourself. Before heading to her bedroom, Margaret looked down at Tommy. Thank you, Tommy. You're a truly brave child. Tommy nodded while wiping his tears. Grandma, I really love you. It's true. Margaret gently stroked her grandson's head before going upstairs. When she closed the bedroom door, she leaned against a chair with trembling hands. The next morning, Margaret woke up after not sleeping a wink. After last night's party, the children had tried to help clean up, but she had sent them home early, citing her poor health. After being alone, Tommy's words kept echoing in her head. She didn't want to believe that her own children would try to deceive her. Around 8 a.m., the doorbell rang. When she opened the door, Tommy was standing there alone. Usually he came with his mother, but today was different. Grandma, I came by myself, Tommy said with an anxious expression. Mom is still sleeping, so I snuck out. Tommy, that's dangerous. Did you walk here alone? Margaret worriedly brought her grandson into the house. Yes, but I had to talk to Grandma about something important. About what happened yesterday. Margaret sat Tommy on the living room sofa and made him warm cocoa. So, can you tell me in detail what you heard yesterday? Tommy began talking while holding the cocoa cup in his small hands. The day before yesterday, the day before the party, Mom and Aunt Jennifer and Uncle Michael gathered at our house. I was sleeping upstairs, but I got thirsty and went downstairs to get water, and everyone was talking in the living room. So what were they talking about? At first it was about the party. But then it became strange talk, Tommy frowned. Aunt Jennifer said, Mom can't live alone anymore, and Uncle Michael said, we have no choice but to put her in a facility. Margaret's chest tightened. And what did your mother say? Mom said it first, but Mom is still healthy, but Aunt Jennifer said, we can have a doctor say it's early stage dementia. Then Uncle Michael said, I can ask a doctor I know to write a diagnosis. Margaret was speechless. Her children were planning to create a fake diagnosis. Then everyone talked about money, Tommy continued. They said, if we sell the house, we'll get a lot of money, we can split it 3 ways, even after deducting facility costs, a considerable amount will remain. Tommy, did they really say such things? Margaret asked in a trembling voice. Really? I heard everything from the top of the stairs. When Mom said, but I feel guilty, Aunt Jennifer said, it's for Mom's sake. Living alone is dangerous. But I know everyone is lying. Margaret couldn't stop crying. Her beloved children were plotting such horrible things for the sake of her assets. That afternoon, Margaret summoned the courage to send a message to all 3 children. Please tell me about the facility matter that Tommy was talking about yesterday. Tell me the truth. A few hours later, replies came from all 3. They were all similar in content. From Jennifer, Mom, what are you talking about? Tommy is mistaken. Don't take what a child says seriously. From Michael, we haven't discussed any facility. This makes me worry about you, Mom. Tommy must have misunderstood something. From Lisa, I'll scold Tommy later. I'm sorry he said something to worry you, Mom. However, their responses felt unnatural to Margaret. The way they immediately and unanimously denied everything was too coordinated. 3 days later, Tommy visited alone again. This time he brought a small tablet. Grandma, look at this, Tommy said excitedly. I recorded evidence. Recorded? Yes, last night everyone gathered and talked again. This time I recorded it with my tablet. Tommy proudly showed the tablet screen. Margaret took the tablet with trembling hands. The screen indeed showed her 3 children. The audio was also clear. Jennifer's voice could be heard. It seems Tommy said something to Mom. I got a message from her. Michael answered, "It's okay, if we all deny it, there won't be a problem. She'll think it's just a child's nonsense." Lisa's voice was filled with guilt, but is it really okay to do something like this? Mom is healthy. That's exactly why we need to act now while she's healthy, Jennifer said coldly. If we wait until Mom really develops dementia, it'll be too late. Managing her assets will become complicated too. Michael continued, I consulted with my friend, psychiatrist Dr. Richardson. If we can get her to have an examination under some pretext, he'll write a dementia diagnosis. But isn't that fraud? Lisa said anxiously. It's not fraud. It's for Mom's future, Jennifer declared. Continuing to live alone in that big house is too dangerous. We'll take responsibility and manage Mom's assets for her. Michael stated specific numbers. If we sell the house, we'll get at least $800,000. With facility costs at $60,000 a year, if we split the rest 3 ways, that's over $200,000 each. But if Mom stays in the facility until she dies, won't all the money eventually be gone? Lisa worried. Don't worry, I've calculated everything, Jennifer explained. We'll choose a cheap facility so Mom's pension and Social Security can cover the facility costs. The house sale proceeds will be entirely ours. The recording ended there. Margaret was horrified and placed the tablet on her lap. Her children had been specifically planning to put her in a cheap facility and divide her assets among themselves. Grandma, I will never side with Mom and the others, Tommy declared forcefully. Grandma isn't sick. I'll protect you. Margaret cried while hugging her grandson. This little boy was the only one who truly loved her. Her own flesh and blood children were trying to betray her for money. Tommy, thank you. You're truly a brave child, Margaret said while stroking her grandson's head. But from now on, don't do dangerous things. Never tell Mom and the others about the recording. I understand. But what will Grandma do? Margaret made up her mind. Grandma has a plan too. But I can't tell you the details yet. Tommy, just act normal. That night, Margaret reviewed the recording content multiple times. Margaret no longer had any doubts. First thing the next morning, she went to a law office and met with Robert Hamilton, the lawyer who had handled the family's legal affairs for many years. Mr. Hamilton, I've made an important decision, Margaret explained while showing the recording. I want nothing more to do with my children from now on. Attorney Hamilton was shocked by the recording's content and immediately considered legal measures. This constitutes attempted fraud. However, respecting your wishes, let's start with a restraining order notification. That afternoon, an official notification from the lawyer was delivered to all 3 children. The content was clear: Margaret Anderson refuses all contact with you. Phone calls, visits, letters, and other forms of communication are henceforth prohibited. Legal action will be taken if violated. In the evening, Margaret's cell phone rang continuously. Calls from Jennifer, Michael, and Lisa came one after another, but she didn't answer any of them. Desperate apology messages were left on voicemail, but she didn't feel like listening to them. The next day, Margaret went to another law office to create a will. The new will clearly stated that all assets would be donated to local children's homes, educational support organizations, and Tommy's education fund. It was made clear that nothing would be left to her children. A week later, Margaret visited the social services office to discuss Tommy's situation. My grandson is being inappropriately influenced by his parents. They involved a child in a plan to lie and deceive his grandmother. She submitted the recording evidence and requested Tommy's protection. The children gradually fell into a state of panic. They tried lying in wait in front of the house and sending messages through neighbors, but Margaret refused to respond to any of it. Only when faced with the discovery of their plan and the possibility of losing their inheritance did they finally understand the gravity of their actions. Lisa was particularly upset. Learning that her son Tommy had recorded evidence, and then receiving contact from Child Protective Services, she faced the crisis of losing custody. "I was against it," she pleaded to her lawyer, but the recording showed evidence of her participation in the plan. 3 months later, Margaret sold her house and moved to a luxury condominium in the city. She didn't give her new address to her children. The court granted her permission to meet with Tommy twice a month at neutral locations. "Grandma, your new home is beautiful," Tommy said with a bright smile, looking around the condominium's living room. "Yes, this time it's truly a home where only trustworthy people visit," Margaret hugged her grandson. "Tommy, if you hadn't had the courage to tell me the truth, I would have remained deceived." "I love Grandma so much," Tommy showed a pure smile. "Mom and the others were going to do bad things, but I'll always be on Grandma's side." A year has passed, and Margaret is now walking a new path in life. She continues her book club activities and actively participates in volunteer work. She has completely cut off contact with her children and has regained peaceful days. One day, Margaret spoke to her husband Robert's photograph. "If you were alive, you would surely have supported my decision. Tommy taught me that bonds of the heart are much more important than blood ties." On the day of her visit with Tommy, he brought a new picture book. "Grandma, please read this today." Margaret smiled as she took the book. "Of course. You're my only real family." Targeting elderly people's assets in the name of family is the ugliest betrayal. However, true family is not about blood relations but about beings connected by pure love that transcends self-interest. Margaret had found the true meaning of family in her relationship with Tommy.